There's a difference between mastery and meaning. One lives in the details no one sees. The other breathes in the space between people. Henrik learned this too late. For 32 years, he'd been the finest tailor in Copenhagen, not because his garments were beautiful, though they were, not because his fabrics were expensive, though they cost fortunes. Henrik was famous for one thing: invisible seams. Stitches so precise, so microscopically perfect, that even under magnification, they disappeared into the fabric like whispers into wind. Royalty wore his suits. Celebrities commissioned his gowns. Museums displayed his work as technical miracles. But here's what no one talked about. No one could actually see his craftsmanship. The whole point, the entire achievement, was invisibility. His shop sat on a narrow street near the harbor, filled with bolts of silk and wool, measuring tapes in silence. Henrik worked alone, bent over his table, stitching by lamplight, perfecting what no eye would ever witness. Until Maya arrived. She was 19, fresh from design school, with paint-stained fingers and ideas that tumbled out faster than Henrik could dismiss them. He hired her reluctantly. He needed help with basic tasks, not creative input. But Maya didn't just sew. She decorated. Her stitches looped and curved across fabric like calligraphy. She embroidered tiny stories into hymns, birds in flight, ocean waves, constellation patterns. Her seams weren't invisible. They were celebrations. Customers adored her work. "Look at this detail," they'd exclaim, running fingers over her decorative stitching. "It's like wearing art." Henrik would watch from his corner, jaw tight, and mutter, "Amateur theatrics. Real craftsmanship is invisible." Maya never argued. She just kept sewing stories into cloth. Then the letter arrived. Thick parchment, no return address. A commission from someone calling themselves The Witness. "I require your finest work, one garment. You decide whether perfection should be seen or unseen. The reveal will occur at the autumn equinox. Both master and apprentice must create. Only one garment will I wear." Henrik read it 3 times. A challenge. Finally, someone who understood that true mastery needed no audience. He would create his masterpiece, a suit so flawless that its very existence would prove invisibility was the highest form of art. Maya read the letter and simply nodded. "When do we start?" For 6 weeks, they worked in parallel silence. Henrik chose charcoal wool, subtle, elegant, impossible to work with. Every stitch had to pierce the fabric at the exact angle, exact tension, exact depth. He worked 16-hour days, rejecting seams that were merely excellent, demanding perfection. Under his magnifying lens, he erased every trace of human touch. The suit would look as if it had materialized whole, untouched by needle or thread. Maya worked on a coat, deep midnight blue, lined with silver thread. But her stitches weren't hidden. They traced patterns across the shoulders, down the sleeves, around the collar. Constellations, migration paths, river systems, stories sewn in silver that caught light like captured starlight. "You're wasting your talent," Henrik said one evening, watching her work. "That's decorative, not disciplined." Maya looked up, her eyes gentle. "Maybe discipline without decoration is just loneliness." Henrik turned away. What does she know? She was young, naive. She didn't understand that mastery meant transcending the need for recognition. The autumn equinox arrived on a Thursday evening, the shop filled with mirrors, 7 of them, antique and strange, arranged by a curator neither Tailor had met. The client entered precisely at dusk. They were elderly, androgynous, dressed in simple gray. Their eyes held something ancient and knowing. They moved through the shop like someone reading a familiar book, touching fabric, studying light. They simply said, "Show me." Henrik presented his suit first. He held it up with trembling hands, his life's masterpiece. Charcoal wool that flowed like water, not a single visible seam. Technically perfect, flawless. The client took it, ran their fingers across the seams. "I feel nothing," they said quietly. Henrik blinked. "That's the point. The craft is invisible. Pure technique." "No," the client said. "I mean, I feel nothing. No joy. No struggle. No human presence. This could have been made by a machine." They set it aside. Maya presented her coat with less ceremony, just held it out, letting the silver stitching catch lamplight. The client gasped, because in the mirrors, all 7 of them, the stitches began to glow. Not metaphorically, actually glow. The silver threads illuminated, revealing their patterns fully. Constellations that mapped the client's birthplace. Rivers that flowed through their childhood. Migration paths their ancestors had walked. Stories Maya couldn't possibly have known, sewn into fabric with visible, deliberate, witnessed craftsmanship. "How did you?" the client whispered. Maya shook her head. "I didn't know your stories. I just sewed what I felt, the universal patterns we all carry, the things that connect us." The client put on the coat. The mirrors reflected not just cloth, but meaning. Every stitch a tiny bridge between maker and witness, between artist and witness, between perfection and connection. Henrik stared at his suit, lying lifeless on the table. Invisible seams, invisible meaning, invisible everything. The client turned to him, their expression soft with understanding. "Do you know why I'm called the witness?" they asked. Henrik shook his head. "Because I exist to see what others create. I'm the eternal audience, the one who watches, appreciates, feels. I've witnessed art across centuries, and I've learned something you've forgotten." They paused, letting silence fill the space. Craft without witnesses is just technique. Beauty that can't be seen or felt isn't beauty. It's ego. You've spent 32 years perfecting invisibility, Henrik, and you've succeeded. Your work is so invisible that even you can't find meaning in it anymore. Henrik felt something crack inside his chest. He looked at Maya's coat, glowing in the mirrors, looked at his suit, technically perfect and emotionally void. Looked at 3 decades of invisible seams and invisible impact and invisible life. "I thought mastery meant transcending the audience," he whispered. "No," the witness said gently. "Mastery means honoring the audience. creating something that bridges the gap between maker and witness. Your Apprentice understands what you've forgotten. We create not despite being seen, but because we're seen. Connection is the point. They wore Maya's coat into the evening, the silver stitches still glowing faintly in the dusk. Henrik stood alone in his shop, surrounded by mirrors that showed him what he'd become. A man so obsessed with invisible perfection that he'd made himself disappear. The next morning, Maya found him at his table, working on something new. A jacket, simple linen. But the stitches, for the first time in 32 years, were visible.